And welcome back. As I mentioned to you guys prior to the commercial break, the first conversation of the morning will be a discussion with attorney Anthony Sylvestre and Bhrea Bowen. As I mentioned, these individuals were in a lawsuit over the past several weeks in which Ms. Bhrea Bowen has emerged victorious. I'll introduce them formally first and then we'll get into the discussion. Good morning, Bhrea.
Good morning.
And good morning,
Morning,
Mr. Sylvestre.
morning, Sonny. Morning, viewers. A pleasure to be here this morning.
No problem at all. Let's begin firstly, Bhrea, by getting an understanding of what actually transpired that resulted in this particular legal challenge, and of course, what some of the implications are for us as Belizeans going forward. Explain to us the incident involving the members of the Gang Suppression Unit, I believe, effecting a raid at your residence.
Well, at the time of the raid, I was attending a scout in Bhrea Bowen at the Camp Oakley. I was a part of the National First Aid team, and we were there helping out with the scouts now. And upon my arrival home, I had no idea exactly what was happening. I had no idea of anything at all, what happened, what took place during the day. When I got home, I had sent my mom a text before I got home, and I found it a bit suspicious that she didn't reply, no? When I got home, I found out from the neighbor that the police were looking for me. And so I got some clothes from home and I went to the police station to turn myself in, no? And I was held at the police station from the Friday until the Monday, where we had a hearing, and then I was remanded. I was denied bail, and I was remanded to the youth hostel for 90 days. I only spent 70 days. If my mom had the finance to take me out before, I'm sure it would have happened, but she herself was locked up for about 30 days, no? And since July, our first court hearing, I had been back and forth to court, having to be late for school or sometimes even have to miss school for the day, because sometimes we wait all day and still get adjourned, no? And like, since I graduated from high school, it's been hard to find a job, no? Because usually if a job application asks you if you've ever been charged or arrested or charged, no? So the minute they look at that, they don't want you working at their establishment, not knowing your background or anything. They just judge you according to what as an incident that happened that you had absolutely no control over.
Let me interject for a brief moment here. Take me back to where this raid was being conducted. What did the police officers find and what took place, or to the best of your knowledge, in your absence, what took place?
Well, according to what my mom told me, she was leaving home at the time, and she turned back when she saw the GSU in front of the house. And she opened the door and she told them, search, because I have nothing to hide. My mom is not that type of person to deal with those, kind of thing. And she said they were searching. They came inside and they insisted that this was my brother's house. My brother was staying there, but only because he recently came out of a surgery. No, he had a surgery. He couldn't even walk. We had to help him do everything. And they insisted that this is my brother's residence, this is his residence. They ransacked my room, and she said they just stopped. Everyone, usually during a search, all the officers that are there are supposed to be in the same place searching.
Yeah.
Well, she had told me, that some of them were still outside. And all of a sudden, they stopped searching inside and went outside, And from the moment she told me that, I knew that it was a setup, because our yard isn't fenced. And at the time, we had a dog that brought garbage into the yard, no? Now, how could you explain all this dirty garbage under here with just a clean black plastic bag with ammunition? How do you explain that? How do you just put that on someone and say, this stuff for you, you know? And
For you, does it confirm what was long being held perhaps as a rumor or a theory, that there are some officers who insist on planting things either on people or on their residents? Did this experience confirm that for you?
yes, definitely. It was hard. It gave me a heartache, but I had to accept it because then it's been happening way before it happened to me.
Yeah.
And I know that it might not be the same case, but it could happen to a whole lot more people, you know? And so I just had to process it and, how to say, be strong for my mom, you know, because
Well, I can
Her.
imagine that this would be a lot for any teenager to have to shoulder, particularly in a situation where you're not involved in this kind of a lifestyle. You were away at the time when this incident took place, and then you come back, you surrender yourself to the authorities only to be held in detention. What was that 70-day experience like for you?
well, the most traumatizing part was the first month when I had no idea what was going on with my mom, or I couldn't talk to her, I couldn't see anyone. That was the hardest part. And all the officers at the youth hostel, they understood what had happened, you know, because I explained to them exactly what had happened, and they treated me like family. So it wasn't as hard as it could have been, you know. But I'm thankful for them because they also helped me get through it, no. Yeah, they supported me, and you know, they didn't look down on me like I'm a criminal or something, you know, because I'm not, you know. So it wasn't as hard as it could have been.
Nonetheless, I mean, to find oneself in a predicament where you're essentially plucked out of your environment, the life you led up to that point, and to be placed in detention among persons who perhaps did in fact commit the crimes that they're there for, and you as an innocent person being placed into that scenario. What were the mental and emotional effects of being in that situation, finding yourself one day no longer enjoying the freedom that we have out here in society?
Well, that really didn't like bother me, the freedom. I mean, yes, I don't have freedom to do the things I should be doing as a teenager, but the only thing that hurt me was I didn't have the freedom to see my family. You know, I couldn't just wake up and go into my mom's room and say, "Morning, Mom," wake her up with kisses or anything like that. You know, I couldn't go to school. They took me out for a sports day, but they didn't allow me to go to school. You know, I thought that was very wrong because you shouldn't deprive a child of their education, you know, because that's the thing that the government and everyone is promoting, education. So why would you take away a child from their education?
Let's focus a bit more about that. I know, Mr. Sylvestre.
I'm very much enjoying the conversation.
We'll get you involved shortly. I just want for our viewers to be able to fully understand and appreciate what took place and how it affected you. From the academic part of it, did this experience affect your ability to either reintegrate into the classroom once you were freed?
No.
How were you able to transition from being locked up to going back to school, and perhaps your classmates were looking at you differently?
Well, honestly, the way they looked at me didn't matter. It was me being back at school, doing something. You know, when I got out, I didn't even have a uniform. I didn't have books, anything, and I still came in, I think it was second. I came in second. No textbooks or anything. You know, that was just to show that you don't have to be weak. You don't have to be bitter. Not just because life gives you lemons, you need to cry. Or because it gives you onions, you need to cry. You need to make onion sauce or lemonade with it. You know, you don't create bad karma for yourself. Like I said, no. It's better to be strong.
I gather from listening to your experience that you're a naturally strong and confident young woman. Did this at any point in time? I would only assume, I've never been incarcerated, sitting there perhaps on an evening and thinking to yourself that, you know what, this may perhaps result in two outcomes. Either it makes you a stronger person, considering the fact that at the time, and you are, innocent of what you are being accused of or what you are being detained for, or would you have caved in, considering the fact that your loved ones weren't around and you were denied that kind of access to be able to interact with them how you would wish?
Well, I have a friend that told me you can do it as long as it's not forever. And my mom always made sure that the Lord came first. So I always had faith that I would come out and I would get justice. I always never once thought that I would be in there for the rest of my life or anything like that. Because my mom taught me that with God anything is possible. Anything. And so I always had faith.
So at 70 days, you were 20 days short of that 90-day period that you would have had to serve ordinarily. At day number 70, when you were released from the facility, what was the reunion like in terms of being able to meet up back with your friends and your family?
Oh, the only person awaiting my arrival was my mom, and that was the best day of the 70 days. You know, I was able to be with her again, and then I was able to vent my feelings because I consider my mom my best friend.
In venting these feelings, having had this experience, was that where the idea of a legal challenge was born? I would imagine coming out, there are all these frustrations and all these feelings perhaps of ill will against the department or members of the department. Was the idea to mount a challenge born out of that vent?
Well, even if I had wanted to, I wouldn't be able to at the time because the law wasn't changed as yet, and we were still up until 2016. We were still dealing with that same case, and it was not until the charges were dismissed then we decided to take action.
So before we get Attorney Sylvestre in on the conversation, when you were released, you had to attend court on a number of occasions to see the matter through.
Yes.
What was that like? I could imagine that perhaps, as you've described earlier, it's an inconvenience to have to leave what you're doing, either school or wherever you were at the time, to go and attend your sessions. What was that like?
Well, communication was the key. The principal knew the situation, and so all I had to do was explain to her, you know, and tell her before time, you know, Miss, I would be late, but I will be able to catch up on my work, you know, and I always found a way to get my homework or whatever it is I missed, you know, so, but even though it was a bit of a challenge, you know, I still got through it.
Now, I want to shift to you briefly, Anthony. How did you get involved in this matter? I ask because you seem to be making your name in the fraternity, the legal fraternity, as the go-to guy for these kinds of situations involving either abuse of power by the police department or the way the Constitution is framed and it needing to be challenged to bring about some balance. How did you get involved with the case involving Bhrea Bowen?
Well, what happened, Bhrea's mom, Miss Rome, her uncle, Mr. Quer, he approached me first to assist her mother because, as Bhrea explained, she as well was incarcerated. And so it started out first with an application for bail for her mom, and then eventually I got involved with the case in the magistrate court where I defended both Bhrea and her mom. And that process, as Bhrea explained, took well over 4 years because it didn't finally culminate until August 2016. So like from July 2012 to August 2016, they were back and forth in court. And obviously, as Bhrea explained, I mean, that had to be a very dizzying experience, both in terms of not ever being involved with the law, having to actually go up the steps of a court and being in a courtroom and all this is something that could be undaunting and further cause a person to have a traumatic experience. I know some people, they don't like the feeling,
Yeah.
And when I first met Bhrea, she explained, particularly the experience on the Friday after she handed herself in, when she had explained the condition which she had to remain over the weekend at the police lockup in Belize City at the Queen Street. That had to, I mean, the way she related it, and as you can see, she's very articulate, in conveying her experience. That moved me, and so, as I indicated to her, man, like, something has to be done. And as she explained at the time, the law was such that the police, the authorities, interpreted the law that once an ammunition or a firearm is found at a premise, a house, a yard, everyone who's ordinarily resident there is taken to the police station. They're detained, they're arrested, and taken before a court. And then the next stage, when you arrive at court, the magistrate would not have granted bail because there was an amendment to the law in 2008. Now, all of these laws, they were passed in an attempt to try to address the crime situation. And admittedly, post like 2009, there was a real spike, upsurge in violent crime. I mean, as we were waiting, I was listening intently as you were relating about the incident over the weekend where someone was shot. So that the issue of gun control and the legislation which deals with that would be the Firearms Act and the Crime Control and Criminal Justice Act. Those are necessary legislation. But the issue, however, is whether the specific amendment at the point in time, so that, for instance, the Firearms Act, that was a law that's passed way back as in 1913. And over the period of years, there has been several amendments. And the amendments which would have Bhrea and her mom and many other Belizeans would have been caught under would have been an amendment to the Firearms Act in 2010, and 2008 and 2010, both an amendment to the Firearms Act and the Crime Control and Criminal Justice Act. And that is a provision, or those provisions are the ones which, unfortunately, Bhrea was swept and caught under. And so the lesson for me, at least, that has to, and many Belizeans, is that whilst you accept and appreciate that government has to deal and address with a real concern, which is crime and upsurge in crime, but how far the laws that are passed, they negatively impact citizens. That is something which always, I believe, must be at the forefront of the policymakers and the legislators' mind, that we know we have to pass laws, we have to address this problem, but will this law go too far and will
Can't be too
transgress?
sweeping.
Can't
in
be
its
too
scope.
sweeping because I admire Bhrea, but unfortunately, not many young people who have had the experience as Bhrea actually take the positive path and positive road that she has, and so her story is an exemplary. Her story is an exemplary story, and it is one hopefully that can be used as a model for not only young persons but also adults who may similarly face the trauma and the horrific experience that the law when executed has caused.
Let me break for a second here. I don't want to lose a train of thought that is going through my mind at
Sure.
the moment. This incident happened while you, Bhrea, were still very much a teenager attending high school. And we've always heard of cases meandering through the justice system. Considering the fact that she was still a minor at the time when this happened, was there any emphasis placed on trying to expedite the matter, considering the fact that she was still enrolled in school and everything that surrounded her as a teenager at the time? Did the magistrate or did anyone within the system seek to move things forward to dispense of it within a timely manner?
Bhrea was charged along with her mother and her brother. They were adults and she was a minor. Ordinarily, you would try to have minors be dealt with and addressed in a family court. But because the charges were jointly made, that posed some administrative difficulties in terms of having her trial take place in a family court and their trial take place in a magistrate court. So a decision would have been taken to have all three persons be tried in the magistrate court.
As an adult in her case?
Well, she started out as a minor. By the time the case finished, she was an adult. And I know many people have this unfortunate and a real perception of perhaps maybe our justice system moves much too slow, and in the process it causes, rather than having persons at the end of the day feel vindicated or they feel some sense of justice, they feel very much a heavy burden, and we just wish to have that entire experience just be forgotten.
I can only imagine that it's exhaustive a process for anyone to have to go through.
Yes.
If you are found in this case with ammunition at your property, you would want to think that, okay, fine, there's a process now that I have to go through in terms of the legal and the judicial system, but it's not that heavy a crime, for want of a better description, where you would think, well, I could go through this process within the course of a year even, and then to have it protracted for so long. And in this case, the timeline, as you've mentioned, she transitioned from being a teenager to an adult by the time the matter was over and done with. Perhaps it's an indictment of
it's a very interesting thing because I was doing some recollection the other day. Okay, when I started first practicing law, like in 2004, cases. I remember at the I started working at the DPP's office, and so cases which may have, for instance, started like in 2003, 2002, were already being dispensed with by 2004. So that there was a very short period in which matters were being disposed of. I think a lot has what clearly to my mind has happened is that there has been a real upsurge in crime, and I think the system may not necessarily, in terms of the human component, it's only now that we are having an increase in, for instance, say, in prosecutors in the DPP's office, in more persons being sent away to to further studies in areas such as forensic science and stuff like that. I think at one point they may have been, for instance, one forensic analyst in the country, which and you see, and so those things take time. Unfortunately, that is not a comfort to anyone who have and who are placed in the position of Bhrea, having to go through that extremely horrific experience. So.
What we'll do at the moment, we'll take a pause briefly. We'll take a commercial break, and when we return, we're going to go back into the second part of our conversation, which I want to preface by mentioning that we want to focus on the employment situation and the difficulties once you've had a criminal record. We'll take a commercial break, and when we return, it's to discuss the second part of the conversation.
When someone you love becomes a memory, the memory becomes a treasure. Channel 5 introduces the Daily Obituaries. The Daily Obituaries will broadcast all death and funeral announcements and memorials to honor your loved one's life and memories. The Daily Obituaries airs on Channel 5 prior to the evening newscast, with subsequent repeats at 10 p.m. and 12 noon the following day. It will also be placed online on our social media platforms, all for a standard package fee. Celebrate their lives and memories with Channel 5's Daily Obituaries. Honor in life and reverence in death.
For over 20 years, Great Belize Television, Channel 5, has been the leader in award-winning local programming. We have also produced some of the best video commercials, documentaries, and live events for clients countrywide. And we continue to offer high-quality production services to maximize your advertising needs for your business or organization. From concept to completion, let us help you achieve your marketing goal by producing your commercial, documentary, graphic animation, live event, or even designing your website. Using state-of-the-art equipment and experienced personnel, we can make your ideas come alive. For more information, come see us on Coney Drive or give us a call at 223-0146 or 223-7781 or email us at gbtv@btl.net. Great Belize Productions, making great television in Belize.
And welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're having a very deep conversation with two guests of ours on the show this morning. We have Bhrea Bowen. She has been discussing with us an ordeal that she has had to live through, first as a teenager and then as an adult. We have with us as well attorney Anthony Sylvestre, who has represented her in the legal matters that came out of this particular experience. Now, before the commercial break, I was mentioning that this segment of the discussion, I want to focus firstly on the experience that Bhrea has had in respect of being able to find a job, given the circumstances surrounding her schooling, her arrest, and everything that happened subsequent to that. Now, Bhrea, let's discuss the issue of seeking employment, considering the fact that you have all of this baggage, so to speak, as we would say. What was that like for you?
Well, even now, applying for a job the right way, the job through job application and everything, you know, I've sent over 50 job applications and haven't received any word back. And the only thing I could think of as to why is because of the case, you know, and because of the charge. Even people that do hire you, when they find out about it, they start treating you completely different, like you're a criminal or something. They ask you, what you to do with gun, or what you to do with this, or what you to do with that. I'm like, please not just assume or interpret the story as to how you want to interpret it. You need to listen and understand, you know when someone is a victim and know when someone is a suspect. You know, you can't just throw everyone in one bag.
But it's a stigma that perhaps some of us in society have. The idea of being wary of giving second chances. Even in a case where someone is guilty, they deserve, by virtue of the society that we live in and the mindset that we have as a forgiving people, to give someone another opportunity to make good on whatever he or she sets out to want to do in their lives. One of the things, and I want to get input from both of you here, one of the things that I have noticed is that there is perhaps a difficulty getting certain records expunged once you've been either found guilty or acquitted of an offense based on your innocence. It's a rather difficult situation to have removed from your records whatever it was that you may have been charged for. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's a very difficult and frustrating experience for persons who have been charged. And the thing is that, as Bhrea has indicated, she was charged. But I do know that one of the questions that potential employers would ask is that, have you ever been charged? And for what? And so those responses, those would immediately evoke, you know, some concern, and potentially it may as Bhrea has indicated, may cause that potential employer to not even seek to go even further, you know, and those responses to those two questions, honestly, because as she said, honestly, she could, for instance, and the temptation clearly will be, well, make I just lie and say I've never been arrested. Who will know? But you know, she has, and hopefully out of this experience, that aspect of her life, you know, and her employability, that now can be cured. You know, so all potential employers will realize that in fact she was a victim. There are a couple of ironies that I've found in respect to Bhrea's case specifically. One, as indicated, I mean, she is a victim, and yet the system, and indeed perhaps maybe the wider society may in fact have not treated her that way, but in fact as a culprit, you know, as a bad person. And two, in terms of the law, we were speaking about the issue of employability. Very interestingly, the law that I spoke to earlier, one of the laws, the Crime Control and Criminal Justice Act, it had a very important aspect to it, which unfortunately has not been utilized. Under the provisions of the Crime Control and Criminal Justice Act, there is supposed to be a body known as the Crime Control Council. And one of the things that the Crime Control Council is supposed to do is that they're supposed to assist in promoting employability and job placement for unemployed youth. So here it is that she was charged, and she was in terms of her denied and being refused bail, she was refused bail under the provisions of the law, a section under the Crime Control and Criminal Justice Act, which would have precluded the magistrate from allowing her to be granted bail. But later on in the same law, there is a body which is supposed to address, you know, persons who may be caught in Bhrea's position. They are the ones who are supposed to take a positive step in terms of trying to put in place mechanisms for persons who, unfortunately, who are caught in the criminal justice system, rightly or wrongly, but they nonetheless, because they remain being in our society, they must be employed, they must therefore have a positive outlook, and we all know, in order for a person to have a positive outlook, they must have some sense of purpose, some purpose of meaningness, and that certainly is achieved through employability. So to your point about the whole issue of employability, it is very ironic that the law which dealt with her in that harsh way is also supposed to have put in place mechanisms to ameliorate and to try to lessen the hardship, but it didn't, you know, and I find that to be extremely ironic, and hopefully the powers that be would take stock and try to address that, because Another aspect of that body is that they're supposed to as well try to see how they could solicit contributions and donations from business sector and donor agency to find constructive programs for reducing crime. So again, it goes to the whole issue of how do you address and minimize and try to stabilize the crime problem, because which we all agree is one that is taxing to all of us, government and the people, because there's the people who are victims. When somebody is killed, the family, they're victims. When somebody is wrongly arrested, they are victims as well. So those are things which always have to be, I believe, in the forefront of policy makers' mind in terms of how to try to address this in a balanced and in a very effective way.
What I'm looking at here for you as the attorney who has had to deal with cases of this particular nature, I'm looking at 3 instances where you have mounted a challenge against the Constitution as it is, based on what is perceived as injustices against these individuals. And I'm looking at the Allison Major situation, I'm looking at the Alric Smith situation as well, and now Bhrea Bowen's. Is it that perhaps there is something fundamentally wrong in the way these laws are being drafted, to where they are very sweeping as opposed to being very particular and very direct in what it aims to do in terms of the way it is framed?
Yes. Well, in all those 3 cases, I mean, what clearly was the finding, including Bhrea's case, is that the law, as interpreted by those who carry it out, the police officers, is that they interpret the law as such that it ought to be applied blanketly, that once they go to a premise and they find a firearm and ammunition, they just take everybody. But the court, in the Allison Major case, there was a case with Alric Smith, and in Bhrea's case, they interpret that no, the court ruled no, that can't be done. The Constitution ensures that all persons, that you cannot be detained, you cannot be locked up, you should not be charged unless there's reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion is what it states. There must be first a suspicion, it must be reasonable. So for instance, in the case of Bhrea, the police went to her home. The bullet was said to have been found under the house. Bhrea was not there, so as the Madam Justice in the case of Bhrea explained, police ought to have done some inquiries. Okay, so who all lives here?
Yeah.
Okay, so Bhrea lives there, but okay, how old is she? She's 14 years old. When last was she at the house? So they would have known, okay, she would have, last time she would have been at home would have been, I think, 3 or 4 days earlier. Okay, it's not as though the bullets were found inside the house again. Reasonable suspicion could, for instance, in instance of this case, the yard wasn't fenced. So a reasonable suspicion, if they wanted to, could, for instance, be, well, they went into the home, they went into a room, the room has graffiti. The Bhrea's room is found in her school bag. So those would be reasonable suspicion to perhaps maybe say, okay, yeah, you know, Bhrea might be the one who's the owner, and she should be arrested and charged. But just to simply say, let's not carry everybody.
It's too wholesale in its approach.
Yeah, it's too wholesale in its approach. I don't know if that was the intent of the legislatures, but certainly in its application, repeatedly that's what the police, the authorities, they have done. And repeatedly the courts have said, no, you can't do that. There's this element of reasonableness that has to be employed. And so, you know, those of us who, you know, would have grown out of that experience. I grew up on the South Side, and you know, it's I'm not telling tales here. I mean, if you are black, you live in a certain neighborhood, you're targeted, and so that therefore it causes a undue injustice, and so when you have a law that is applied so sweepingly, that in a sense is almost like a carte blanche license for police officers to be rogue. If they don't like somebody, they could just
put something on you, and
something
then
and
you
just
go through the
go
whole
through the
tedium
whole,
of
yeah, and everybody being taken and our entire family being subjected to this such a horrific experience. So hopefully the authorities will take a different approach in terms of applying this law, because as stated earlier, and we must accept that there has to be gun control. So nobody dispute that, but how you go about executing that law?
Now, Bhrea alluded to a protocol that should be abided by and adhered to by officers when conducting a search. I believe in the initial part of your description of what took place, you mentioned that the officers ought to have been together in that particular area where they were searching, but that your mother had indicated that some of the officers remained outside of the property when the search was conducted, which, I'm not a lawyer here, but I'm just trying to look at the whole common sense of it all. Wouldn't that then create some kind of doubt, perhaps a reasonable doubt as it is described, that one of the officers could have very easily been the one to drop the bag amongst the garbage that was in the yard, and then lo and behold, you find yourself in such a predicament?
Well, I don't want to speculate now, but what you did, you put your finger on it. You said common sense, because one of the first things that they taught us at law, law school, is that the essence of the law are common sense. So when you basically strip it in all these legal jargons, it's basically founded in common sense. And so common sense would tell you, listen, if you are doing a search, and the persons who live at that house, they must at all times be present when you're searching, so as to remove whatever potential suspicion of you planting or you bringing, putting the stuff there. So in the case, and during the criminal trial, that was one of the things that we were able to be successful at. When the search was conducted, as you had police officers outside, then you have police officers inside. Miss Bhrea's mom could not be in both places at the same time, so nobody knows, and so that would have created a reasonable doubt, and would have caused the magistrate to immediately dismiss the charges against both Bhrea and her mom. And so you are right, in terms of protocol, that common sense would tell you that ought to be done, no?
Does this change the whole state of play in terms of the way things are currently versus what they were then, and the fact that you have successfully challenged this law 3 times? Does that now, should that sort of force the lawmakers to go back and revisit or make amendments to this era of the law?
Well, what seems to be paramount is, well, certainly the law needs to be looked at. It was, to the government's credit, perhaps after public pressure, the law was changed. It was amended in 2014. So it was passed in 2010, and then during that 4-year period, the horrific stories and experiences of people, government may have been forced to change the law. But I think more importantly, persons who execute, who carry out the law, they, I think, do need to have better training. And so that is an issue perhaps maybe, you guys could take up with the police department, what mechanism, what systems are now being put in place to have police be sensitized about the fact that, look, we cannot, as it were, have this sweeping approach, and that there must be this element of reasonableness in the way they go about carrying out this and executing this law, because the law has, as we have seen, some very graphic and very horrific consequences once applied to a citizen. You just go in a jail and you have to wait there until someone, until you have the monies and the means to be able to obtain the service of an attorney and apply to the Supreme Court for bail.
Well, fundamentally, from the very beginning, you're told there's a presumption of innocence until otherwise proven. And when you look at a situation such as this, and there's a word that I am all too familiar with that I hate using, draconian. Like, it's too heavy, it's too direct in its assault of one's freedom and rights and what have you. Where are you at the moment now, having gone through this entire ordeal? What is your outlook on life as a young woman now, having survived this entire process and the fact that the court has ruled in your favor?
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Short and sweet. So I'm assuming that your resolve at the end of all of this remains intact. What would you say to anybody else, be it a young person or an older person who finds themselves in such a situation?
Always keep the faith and always look for the silver lining in the dark cloud. Stop looking at the dark cloud because it won't rain. But you have to look for the silver lining always, because there is always justice, even if it might not come immediately or it might not come how you want it. But if it come in the right way, you must accept it, right? And must always be strong, not just for yourself, not just for your family, but for others that may experience the same thing. Because like you said, everyone is different. Not everyone takes it the same way. Not everyone will just be calm and, still continue to be a law-abiding citizen. Not everyone will do that, So I just hope that everyone always try to look for the silver lining.
My final point before we wrap up this conversation. So there is an award of $10,000 that has been granted to you as a result of this whole ordeal. Do you believe, Anthony, that the amount or the quantum here is suitable for what this young lady had gone through and perhaps the inconveniences, the grave inconveniences caused by all of this?
Well, I think the court had explained that there are other things that they had to factor, they had to take into consideration, and so certainly, and the court indicated that it would have perhaps wanted to award more, but given those various considerations, that is the figure that was arrived at. I wouldn't want to say no more than that at this point in time. We were, of course, we got the declaration that we wanted. It's a vindication to Bhrea that what was done to her was extremely and terribly wrong. And hopefully, coming out of all of this, the authorities could see and utilize Bhrea, as a perhaps maybe a role model and as someone particularly to deal with at-risk youth. So we're hoping that perhaps maybe they could find meaningful ways to utilize Bhrea's obvious talents, in a much needed capacity, because very much need that we need. We are very short of young enterprising people, and so Bhrea, she exemplifies this, and I would hope that the authorities that they utilize her, and so that the positives out of this can continue.
Final words are yours, Bhrea.
Thank God. Thanks to all the people who support and understand. And I just hope that it doesn't happen to anyone again. Anyone, because it's not a good experience to have your freedom taken away from you. Because I saw it as just my physical freedom taken away, not my mental. You can be behind bars without being behind bars. Don't imprison yourself,
Thanks for having joined us this morning.
Thank you.
It's been a rather interesting and very deep conversation. We'll take a commercial break and we'll come back and have the second segment of our show, which is all things cycling. Stick around.